have today Mr. Krishna Pendyala. Krishna was a graduate of ISU actually formally in education, but he came to us as an engineer, and he studied liberal arts. He was able to combine his interests in the liberal arts with education, and that is what he ultimately got his graduate degree in. He is the perfect example of what we're talking about today. He is a man who is an entrepreneur, he is an author, he is a life coach, he is a social change agent, he is as intriguing and interesting as he is inspiring. I'm excited that he's here. He's come from Pittsburgh to speak with us today, and so I will let him have the podium, and I will sit down and have a piece of cake.
Good afternoon. Hopefully you guys had a good lunch. Yes?
Yes.
Tasty. I wish we had more students here, but we're going to videotape this in case. If you like it, you can share. If you don't, please. So, John probably doesn't know many things about me, and that's what I'm going to share today. So he may regret having me here today. Hopefully not. So, the whole idea about choices is what I've been fascinated by, because we've heard the adage that we are a product or a sum of our choices. And I always say that depends on if you like math, because if you don't like math, obviously it's either product or sum, and maybe that's why we don't pay enough attention to making choices. But what I'd like to share today is the number of poor, if not really bad choices that I have made in my life. And the very fact that I can stand here is a testament to what one of the previous panelists shared. It's never too late. It's really never too late. And that's why I'm giving that caveat. If John wants to drag me off the stage, we'll see who wins that. So, I think, but the real reason is Dean Murray wanted you guys to be really wise. And wise comes from the whole idea of my first principle, which is all about learning from mistakes. How many of you really learn anything from doing it right without trying? I know in my first company it went really well until things started to go wrong. And I didn't even know what I was doing right, because you just do whatever you think it is, and you really don't know until things start to go wrong. So learning from mistakes is a key principle that I think we don't celebrate. We kind of put people down when they make a mistake, when really that's your opportunity. So when you make a mistake, and that's where I even define dumb, and I'm going to share how I've been dumb before. You're dumb when you don't learn from your own mistakes. And the key is, jokes aside, I'm here because I slowly learned to make better choices, painfully. And my hope is you don't have to go through that pain that I had to go through, because I've learned a few principles out of that pain that I wanted to share that might actually help you overcome those without having to go through them yourself. So really, today's topic is titled, Mindful Choices for Success. And we've all heard this phrase, follow your passion, right? Follow your passion. What does that mean? What actions do you take when somebody tells you follow your passion? So I'm actually going to walk you through what I did and how that didn't work and how then I had to make it work, right? So the reason I feel qualified to speak here is because, one, I probably made the worst choice anyone can in their life. Not once, but 3 times So that makes me definitely qualified to be dumb. But then, number two is finally waking up and saying, maybe there's a different way. Which means anyone here can also make that course correction, even if they made a bad choice multiple times. And the third thing I want to share with you is, no matter what you choose, whether it's a career or a major, there is a way to make it work if you understand some basic human principles. So there's no one right way. You can make things work if you understand some basic human principles. So the key is, for starters, I don't believe you can make a worse choice than what I did, which is I tried to take my own life in college, not at ISU, but the one before. Not once, 3 times. I don't think you can do anything worse than that. Do you agree? So now how do you get past that? So then finally, so that's what I call dumb. You tried 3 times, but that's when the opportunity came up, which is the aha, first wake up. You can't even kill yourself. So might as well learn how to live. I mean, you guys can laugh, no problem, because I laugh too. But the idea is it took that long to learn to see life a different way. But it had to go through that down so that I look at it and say, maybe, I need to learn how to live. And that's the whole second principle, which is, how do you just not learn to live, which is what most people call survive. But today I would call it, how do you actually learn to thrive, not just survive. So in the beginning it was, obviously, when you are desperate, then it's about survival. But once you learn how to survive, then you can learn how to thrive as well. And the whole reason why I was driven to that desperation was really because college was really hard for me. I was a top student in high school, and then I go into this undergraduate school where 100,000 students write an entrance exam and they take only 1,000, which means 1 in 100. That means everybody next to you, behind you, in front of you is as smart or smarter than you are. So you end up with an F in your first exam because of the curve. I had not seen an F in my life. And I had skipped my senior year in high school because in India at that time, you could write this entrance exam. If you made it in, you're in. What I didn't realize, and everybody thinks skipping a grade is great, not so. So I did not study calculus, and I got into a top engineering school. How does that work? Bad. That's all I can tell you. So for a while, how many of you here know calculus? Okay, so I have to tell you, epsilon ruined my life. That little epsilon came in, I never could understand it, but that's what really got in the way. That, and I was 16 in college, so 16, no calculus, in college with very, very smart people. Bad news. So I've delayed my kids, they'll be 18 when they get to college, purely because I don't want to have them go through what I did. The interesting part was, with that comes a whole host of other problems, which is your social skills are not great, you have issues, then you're falling behind, then you resort to cheating, then you get threatened to be expelled, and boom, everything comes together and you say, this is it, I'm out, I'm checking out. So from that, as I said, when you know you can't even kill yourself, and then there is that option, which is how do you learn how to live? It's pretty interesting, because that option is out. So now I have to look at another place. And it was very interesting how that little change started to take place. I was paralyzed for 6 months, so that gives you time to think. You can move, you can think, and then reflect. And I'd really like to distinguish between thinking and reflecting. Thinking is what we do all the time. All kinds of thoughts keep coming all the time, and that actually doesn't get us sleep. But reflection is about looking back, seeing maybe how you could view something a different way, and then seeing how you can apply that into your life. So that's really a key piece of how we could look ahead and make some changes while looking back. So coming to the first topic of our conversation, which is follow your passion. So once I decided, okay, I need to learn how to live, I translated that into finding something that energizes me, finding a purpose to live. Find something to hang your hat on. And that purpose for me was actually photography. I actually hated engineering by this time because of the reasons I told you, calculus and the rest of it. And more importantly, the work I was doing in engineering, I was a civil engineer, was looking down a column, across a row, taking a number, and plugging it into a formula. And I said to myself, you know, a computer could do that a whole lot faster than I can, which means I'm going to be out of a job. Or I could become a keyboard operator. That was scarier. I don't know how to type, I still don't know how to type. Okay, so that's, the computer can do it faster and you can't type. That makes it really, really bad. So I said, okay, let's choose photography because that is something maybe a computer cannot do. Even that has been challenged now 30 years later, but it still takes craft from somebody behind the camera. Even though for videotaping a lecture like this, we have cameras that actually track people as they move and so on and so forth, but still, filmmakers exist. Great films are made by people, not by automated cameras. So I pursued photography and I said, I want to go to the United States because in the US, you have the freedom to do what you want. Or that's what I perceived. I still think that is true. Nobody challenges you, oh, you are an engineer, what are you doing in this field? That here it's pretty common to switch. And that's, I think, the first step. And the next thing is a plug for ISU. The people I met here, Dr. Thompson, and he was the chair of the department. It was such a different relationship between the faculty here and the faculty I had before. There it was much more of a, we will show you how dumb you are kind of faculty, whereas here it was, let's help you grow. That, I think, is something that I don't know if it happens in other universities, but I can tell you I was the beneficiary of that at ISU. And that is why I made the trip here, as to be here in front of you and share that those of you who are students, please take advantage of the relationship between you and your faculty. Then coming to, after finding a purpose, if that's first step of finding your passion, I want to distinguish between passion and obsession. And for me, I didn't know any of these words. I was just trying to find something to be interested in. And I went over into obsession because I needed something to hang my hat on, found photography, and I'm doing that 100% of the time, maybe more. Not eating properly, and dark room, night, which means not sleeping properly, that's when it crossed over into obsession. And I wanted to be this freelance photographer. By the way, freelance photographer, I later learned by losing a fiancé, that freelance photographer means no real job and no real paycheck. Okay? There are a few people who can do it well, but by and large, freelance photographer usually means no steady income, no steady paycheck. Sorry, or no steady job for that matter. So I want you to be sensitive to dealing with passion versus obsession. Which really brings me to the second point, which is after you figure out what energizes you, the next thing, which is after I lost my fiancée, because I told her that, you know, I won't be the steady breadwinner in the family, that's your responsibility, and she had a degree, master's degree in computer science, so she said yes. And then I got engaged and I came to ISU, everything is going great, and then I get a telegram. How many of you here even know what that means? Yes, great. Come on, John, you should know. Yeah, okay. Telegram, right? So I got a telegram. It's important, give me a call. I'm a graduate student making $301.78, okay? I can't ever forget that number. As a graduate assistant. And then, those days, a minute on AT&T was $2.74, 1984. You guys can't even fathom these numbers. Unlimited is what you get right now. $2.74 a minute. So that expensive phone call costs $168. All the money I'd save to buy a camera, and then we break up, right? So don't believe any of these AT&T ads about all good things coming. And so now I said, oh my God, I now have to support myself. So comes rule number 2 of follow your passion. What will others pay for? Because you got to support yourself. Somehow, because too many people look at everything as black and white. Follow your passion. Okay, I'll forget everything else and that's what I'll do. There have been instances of that actually working because this thing just happens. But my practical advice to you is at least check this one out. What will others pay for? Just to be aware of where is it that there could be an exchange. And that's my third principle, which is delivering value. So I've always told my children, make sure you deliver value because that's when there's a currency exchange. When you provide value, people are willing to pay for that. Even if it's while following your passion, make sure there is somebody out there who appreciates that because that's value to them. It doesn't have to be valuable to everybody, but you need to know who it is valuable to because that's when you can make an exchange. And that exchange is what keeps you alive. So that's the principle of how, and notice I've been learning each of these things because of watching something, right? And that's why for me learning from mistakes is very important. So when somebody puts somebody down for making a mistake, they're really blowing that opportunity for learning. And I really want, I know there are enough faculty in this room, please make sure that that is what can be learned out of this. So that brings me to the next point, which is, and I tried to play with words. So the first one was learning from mistakes. The second one is delivering value. And the third is really about what are you good at? Because I was an engineer in the liberal arts, which means I was technically good, but I wasn't the greatest at composition and sketching and so on. But I was technically good. So my technique was very good. And so the element of luck is a great thing as well, which I don't think we pay enough attention to. 1986 was the year personal computers were entering the field of video. And here I was, the only geek in the video industry, right? Because those people who were more from liberal arts at that time and who came from the art side of things said, oh, no, computers don't enter my field. That's for you, those guys. But since I was in the field, and I enjoyed computers, I hated computers in engineering, but here I felt this would give me an edge. What am I good at? I'm good at understanding technology. So can I actually use this here? But I got to tell you another story. So I was at School of Education, first day, microcomputers in education class. All the rest of my classmates are school teachers. I'm the only engineer. But I didn't know where the on-off button for that Apple computer was. So all these other people, even though they're not technically savvy, are doing things, and I'm sitting with a dark screen, not even a blank screen, absolute black, feeling really uncomfortable to ask somebody where the on-off switch was. True story. But then, again, what do you say? I got to catch up. Because everybody else knows what's going on. I'm the engineer, and I don't know where the on-off switch is. From that to becoming ultra proficient, and I did some cool things in that class that got me in front of the professor who actually, Dr. Gilman, who passed away a few years ago. And he was supposed to be a tough guy to deal with. But thanks to being an engineer, he respected that, and he and I got along really well, so much so that 2 people after me got graduate assistantships. My friend and my best friend and my ex-fiancée both got their graduate assistantships with him. So that's the power of connection when you're able to deliver value. So even as a graduate assistant, you can deliver value to your professor. So this brings me to my principle number 4, is, I call it, lean on your strengths. There's a philosophy out there that says, look at your weaknesses and try to improve them. In the real world, usually they hire somebody else to do that work. Right? That's what teams are made of. If you're not good at something, they hire somebody else to do that job. So they hire you for your strengths, not your weaknesses. But many times in school, we teach people how to learn and improve your weaknesses. So if you have, let's say, 5 things to focus on, and you're good at 3 things, now you take your time and try to improve these 2. So if you, let's say, were a 7 on 10 on 3, and a 4 on 10 on 2 of them, and you take all your energy and try to improve these 4 to 7s, what are you going to get? A 7 average. Or maybe that 7s, the 3 7s will start to drop because you've now diverted your attention from those 3 to the other 2. So I'd rather you just say, these 2 are not for me. I'm going to put my energy into the first 3 and make those 3 7s, maybe 8s and 9s. Make sense? This is not the prevailing thought out there. But the people who really excel focus on the things that they're good at, which is what I'm talking about. Call it leaning on strengths rather than and learning from mistakes. So now you can put these together. So when you find that overlap, that's when I believe the 5th principle comes in, which is you finance your lifestyle. And I choose words very carefully. Success to me is meeting your goals, whatever they may be. So financing your lifestyle, and this is what I tell my kids, I don't care what you do, as long as you finance your lifestyle, which means they're not coming to me for a payout. So that's really what it is. You can do whatever you choose to do as long as you finance your own lifestyle, which means you got to help them realize. So I'm constantly telling them, if you want to live in this house, this is what it'll cost you. If you want to drive that car, that's what it's going to cost you per month. So my son one day says, can I live in a small apartment? I said, do you know how much that would cost? Technically, because we bought our house at a good time in 2000, the mortgage is actually cheaper than a 2-bedroom apartment rent. But he needs to know that. So it's not the size of the house that matters. And most parents don't discuss this because, oh, they're too young or whatever. And to be honest, our monthly mortgage payment for this nice house is $1,200 bucks. You cannot get a 2-bedroom apartment in Pittsburgh for $1,200 bucks. So it is not the size, it's the amount it costs per month to live in that house. So these are things of how to educate people into what a lifestyle may cost. And I used to work in the wealth management industry, and we had clients with over $100 million. And even they didn't understand this concept because they could run out of money how they spend. So this one kid says, I'm going to buy this Maserati. So he said, do you know how much that is? I said, no. So we did the math. And yes, he gets a trust check every month. So we did the math for him. We coached him how to do the math himself. And at the end of it, he said, I think I'm going to keep my pickup truck. There you go. That's really what education should be, where a good teacher, I was told, this is from Tim Galway, who did all the inner game work, who said, this sentence hit me like a 2x4 because he said, I realized that I was more committed to teaching than people learning. I'm going to repeat that. I realized I was more committed to teaching than people learning. And that was me as well. Which means I'm looking at how do I make my slides better, or how do I do this better, or how do I say that better. But I think creating context for learning to take place is really the fundamental purpose of a teacher. That's what he called it. A teacher can control the environment and make it conducive for learning to take place. And I'm a firm believer of that because that's really what we can control. By telling people what to do, we know how well that works for those who have kids. So I'm going to switch to how to make choices and make you aware of 2 invisible forces that each of us own. And I have put animals on them because animals are supposed to be friendly, they're metaphorical, and they're creative, because I came up with the notion of a pig, which stands for our desire to pursue pleasure and instant gratification, and we tend to try to feed the pig most of the time. And in fact, we use that even in our language, don't be a pig, right? And then this animal is not as commonly used, especially in the US, we don't use the word ape as much. But ape stands for avoiding painful experiences, which is our desire to move away from pain. So these two animals are what I know we all own. But if we don't watch them, they will call your shots for you. And it's so interesting, it's like blind spots. Many times we are in autopilot or what I call knee-jerk, right? We make choices purely in an automatic fashion. And I feel at that time, these two characters are running the show. So it's very important. I'd like you to reflect and look at the past even 24 hours and see how many of those choices were actually made by these two characters. It's amazing when you know that you own a pig and an ape. I've had so many people talk about it. I mean, kids all the way to two 72-year-old ladies were talking to each other, their daughter told me. One was complaining to the other, I go to my daughter's house and the kids are unruly, they don't clean up, and I have to do all the work, clean up before my daughter gets home. So the other lady said, why don't you have a chat with your daughter? And she looked at her like that and she said, you're an ape. That's basically, she didn't want to have that confrontation with her daughter about her children because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And so many times we find that we don't want to deal with uncomfortable conversation. So one of my roles today was to come here and have those uncomfortable conversations that gives you an opening to talk to each other about what's possible, because now that it's out in the open. So the whole idea, I think John got me here to help you learn to be wise, and wisdom is about learning from other people's mistakes. So I think he said, this guy has screwed up so many times and he's still around, maybe I should bring him here so that he can share all his moves so that my kids can avoid making those. Was that your plan? So my hope is, if you watch somebody ahead of you walk into a puddle of water and disappear, don't think you can walk on water. The chances are that's what happened. And it will happen to you as well. So being wise is about learning from other people's mistakes. And smart is learning from your own. And all I've done is be smart finally, because I've made so many of them that you can change and learn. And I'll tell you the number of careers I've changed. So civil engineering was really not a career, I ran out of that one. But after finishing my graduate work here in educational media and television, I became an educational video producer. And that's where opportunity began, because when, as I mentioned, when computers started to enter the field, I got an edge. So that's when I leaned on my strengths, became really good at that, and that's what launched an entrepreneurial venture in creating learning systems, because I enjoyed teaching as well. And that led to a company in '91. We called it online learning then because there was no internet. It was local area networks. And because of my background in video, I always felt that learning takes place emotionally, much better than logically. And video is a very powerful medium to tell stories. And so started this company where I use this theme called emotional logic, which is you lead with emotion and then justify with logic. Then that kind of gets imprinted in your mind much stronger than just talking facts and reciting why someone should do something. So that was an interesting way of how I was able to leverage that. And then I learned the other bad lesson there. I didn't know anything about business. So you start a company because you think you know what you're doing. And then I got cleaned out by two partners. And in fact, one of them was my mentor. And so my brother asked me to ask him, you were my mentor, and how did you kind of do this? So, he looked at me with a straight face and he said, in your first company you make mistakes and I wanted you to learn. So he still thinks he did me a favor, maybe. So that's how sometimes things work. But having been through that, I think I became a really good businessman simply because I had to learn that. So the next company was done very differently, so on and so forth. But the key idea is learn to be wise as soon as you can. I took a long time. I hope those of you who heard this message will start today. And my final secret principle that I share is titled Living 2 Days at a Time. How many of you have heard 1 day at a time? Okay. So what happened is with 1 day at a time, it's a very noble backing behind 1 day at a time, but people tend to misinterpret everything. They look for loopholes, and when you bring attorneys in, they look for even more loopholes. So 1 day at a time could mean there is no tomorrow, which means you can do whatever you want today, blow it all out, have a blast because there's no tomorrow. So I got that covered on this one because there is a tomorrow, which means you can do whatever you want today as long as it doesn't impact your tomorrow in a negative way. So that's the whole idea of live 2 days at a time. It's a very simple concept because you can do whatever you want today as long as it either helps. So the last thing I'm going to request is, do you think your mind is more important or equally as important or less important than your teeth? More, equal, less than your teeth, your mind. Is your mind more important to you than your teeth? Yes? Yes?
Yes, either one of
Pardon?
them. Can't live without either one of them.
Well, you can have dentures. So technically the mind, but guess what? We don't even spend the 2 minutes we spend brushing our teeth in the morning and at night on how we take care of our mind. So if you think it is equally important or more important, do something to reflect, at least 2 minutes a day to see what happened, because that reflection is what gives you the opportunity to learn from your mistakes. It could be, what did I do right today? What went wrong today? What can I do different tomorrow? How can I, and reflection by itself is a fairly relaxing exercise. So you will get the benefit of side effect of that as well. And if you're into any contemplative practice, that's a great idea as well. So reflection is the one thing I'd say can help you do this. And lastly, I love this quote from Nelson Mandela, because most of us run our life because we try to get away from our fears. And if you ask, again, reflect back and see, look at your choices that you've made in the last 24 hours, and you will find many of them were driven from fear. And if that's not true, more power to you. So with that, I'd like to say thank you.